The great thing about life is there's multiple ways to do the same thing. Take keeping warm for example. Well, I could build a fire, I could turn the central heating on, or I could perhaps put some more clothes on, or I could wear this obscenely oversized fleece and I'm going to be toasty warm. Whichever one I chose, the end result is the same. And in our hobby, that's exactly the same principle. There's multiple ways to achieve the same thing. I've had a fair few comments about zenithal priming and how I achieve that. Now, there's multiple ways to do zenithal priming, so let's take a look at the one that I use at the moment. Hi guys, I'm Wayne. Yeah, it's still cold here. Winter, what are you going to do, eh? Certainly can't afford to turn the heating on. Gotta buy Warhammer stuff. Right, so, zenithal priming. This is where I'm probably going to lose a load of followers and nobody's going to watch the video because, yeah, I use an airbrush. I'm not ashamed, it's not a problem. I think we need to get past the whole thing about hating airbrushes in the hobby. Now, you can achieve the same effect using spray cans or indeed with a brush. That's not what I'm going to do. I like to get through things nice and fast, and to be honest, the finish that I get with an airbrush and inks is so much better. With that in mind, let's get over to the hobby desk and let's take a look at how I do it. If you do it different, let me know down in the comments. I'd be really interested to know which you think's the best method. Okay, without further ado, let's do it. Jumping straight in then, we have the airbrush, the black that I'm going to use to base coat, anything will do, but I'm using Molotow all-in-one black. And then the white that I use is an ink. It's the Liquitex acrylic ink. I really like this stuff. It's pretty cheap and it does last a long time. Now, for this example, I'm going to use an Imperial Guard model from a kill team. I want to repaint it, so this is a really good example of getting that zenithal prime that I will use as a base for the revised paint job. Okay, so let's just jump into how we prepare. Now, this will depend on your airbrushes and the specific types of inks that you're using, but for me, this works pretty well, so you should have a fairly good success. Okay, so I like to mix my inks, everything that I put in my airbrush outside of the airbrush, and I use these little plastic shot glasses. So they're super cheap. You can use them for a little while before they need throwing away, so it's not that bad in the environment. After mixing the ink thoroughly with an agitator in there, just to make sure that there's no clumping. White can be a little bit dusty. Next up, I'm going to add some thinner. Now, I don't go with specific quantities, I just put some in. It's generally a couple of drops that I put in for this amount of paint, and then I also put a little bit of flow improver in. Now, you could use some distilled water as well here. Either or, to be honest, it's whichever's closest to hand. And again, I'm going to put another couple of drops in and then I'll mix it well. I use an old brush for this. And make sure it's completely mixed up, and it should have the consistency of skimmed milk is what I find best that works for my airbrush with the pressures that I like to work with. Now, you will have to experiment with yourself for your own setup, depending on how you like to work. So you're never going to get some firm values that work for everybody across the board. That's the first thing to understand, and I think that's what puts a lot of people off. So once we've got the right consistency, I get into the airbrush cup, just pouring it straight in, and I'm usually good to go. Before I actually start, what I tend to do as well, but I've not recorded it, is I'll just run a little bit of flow improver through the airbrush before I actually put any paint there, and that just kind of primes the airbrush, and I find it minimises the amount of clogging. So after we've base coated the entire thing in black, I don't think you need a tutorial on how to do that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to give it light coats from top down, and then we're going to gently spray around the model very light coats of ink. Now, this is just to kind of give definition to all of the top down areas that would have some light on them. Now, because we're working in thin coats, it should dry very fast, so make sure you leave a little bit of time between each layer as you're doing this. You only need a couple of seconds and it should be more than dry enough to carry on. So once we've got a reasonable build up around all of the raised areas, then we can switch to going for the zenithal top down approach. Now, I don't tend to go from directly above. What I tend to do is go from about 10 or 15 degrees in the direction that the miniature's facing. What this does is bring emphasis to the head and any of the upper parts of the body, so the shoulders, and it draws the eye up to the face, which is the most important part of the miniature for the majority of the time. So again, work in thin coats. You can do this a number of times, and that's what I tend to do. I build up slowly, getting whiter and whiter and whiter until I'm at a reasonable enough contrast where I can distinguish the black undercoat from the grey highlights of the upper surfaces to the very white, bright points of the face where the light would be focused on. Now, it's not 100% natural, but that's how we tend to work. Now, what you can also do is emphasize certain points of the miniature that you want to draw attention to. So you'll notice that I tend to emphasize the weapons, or where I might have some OSL in later stages of painting. So in this case, on the power sword, I'm giving the hilt a little bit of emphasis as well, because that's where the power nodes for the blade will be. Now, once you've done that and you've picked out all the areas that you are going to want brighter, it's literally a case of rinsing and repeating to a point where you're happy with the level of brightness that is showing through. Bearing in mind, any colours that you put on the top of this, if you work in thin enough layers and transparent paint, most acrylic is transparent, unless you put a lot of layers on, in which case you build up the opaqueness, then this underlighting will show through, and it gives you some more natural highlights without having to paint those in yourself. What it can also be useful for is it can give you the building blocks of the volumes. If you're painting to a higher level, I find this is a very good way of giving me almost like a cheat sheet of where I would want to be putting the light. You don't necessarily have to do it from the top down. You can do it from any direction, obviously, but for the most part, when we're painting gaming miniatures, we want the light source to be above us, as if it was sort of midday sun. And using an airbrush, it really is as simple as that to get a good zenithal prime. Now, like I say, you can do this from any angle to give varying different effects. Maybe you've got some underlighting and you want it set at night. Any of those things are possible. Now, you could do this with a rattle can. Obviously, you'd have to be a little bit more careful and you won't be able to get some of the fine details, but it is possible. And you could do it with a brush. Dry brushing and stippling is a great way to achieve a similar technique. It does take a little bit longer, but it is possible. So if you would like to see me demonstrate that, please do leave me a comment down below and I'm sure I can put something together. But for now, that's pretty much it for this. Now, if you did get some value out of this video, please do subscribe, give me a thumbs up, give me a like, leave a comment. Do follow me on Instagram if you're not. I'm at Forge of Solace on all the social medias, and I would appreciate that. I think next we're going to paint this up. I've got an entire kill team of these, so I might document that process just in case I ever want to paint any more Imperial Guard to join this regiment. And I think that's all we've got to say about this. So, happy hobbying. I hope you got some value out of this and learned something, and I'll see you soon. Until then, see ya.